When credit applications are approved, everyone is happy. When a creditor has to deliver disappointing news, problems and disputes are far more likely to arise. Therefore, a smart creditor will follow the procedures regarding adverse actions to the letter. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act, as implemented by Regulation B, requires creditors to notify businesses and consumers applying for credit about the action taken on their applications within specified time periods. If adverse action is taken, as defined in ECOA and Regulation B, the creditor must provide an adverse action notice disclosing the reasons for taking adverse action, and if a credit score was used, the key factors adversely affecting the score. These notices provide transparency to the credit underwriting process and help protect applicants against potential credit discrimination by requiring creditors to specify the reasons for taking adverse action. We also want to point out that the Fair Credit Reporting Act also imposes adverse action notice requirements in certain circumstances. Unlike ECOA, however, the Fair Credit Reporting Act applies only to consumers and more broadly applies to adverse action on certain non-credit transactions, such as employment or insurance applications. However, we are going to focus on ECOA requirements, beginning with the time frame of when to notify an applicant of an adverse action. A creditor must notify an applicant of an action on the application, including an adverse action, within 30 days after receiving a completed application concerning the creditor's approval of, counteroffer to, or adverse action on the application, or 30 days after taking adverse action on an existing account, or 90 days after notifying the applicant of a counteroffer if the applicant does not expressly accept or use the credit offered. In the case of an incomplete application, the creditor must send notification to the applicant specifying the information needed, designating a reasonable period of time for the applicant to provide that information, and informing the applicant that failure to provide the information requested will result in no further consideration being given to the application. Also, when an appraisal is completed and paid for by the borrower in a denied loan, the borrower can request a copy of their appraisal. A creditor must mail or deliver a copy of the appraisal report promptly, meaning generally within 30 days, after the creditor receives an applicant's request, receives the report, or receives reimbursement from the applicant for the report, whichever is the last to occur. When an application involves more than one applicant, notification need only be given to one of them, but must be given to the primary applicant where one is readily apparent. Please note that when an already established revolving line of credit exists and a consumer requests an increase of their existing credit line, lenders are not required to send a notice of adverse action if they do not approve the requested credit line increase of the consumer. Let's take a moment to consider what must be included in the notification of an adverse action. If the creditor decides to take adverse action, the applicant is entitled to a statement outlining the reasons for the negative action. The creditor can simply provide the statement to the applicant or give a written notification of adverse action, which includes the applicant's right to a statement of reasons within 30 days after receipt by the creditor of a request made within 60 days after the notification, and the identity of the person or office from which the statement of reasons may be obtained. Since credit score information is given to a borrower in the application process, redisclosure of credit scores are unnecessary on the credit denial letter. It is important to note that certain states have their own requirements for disclosures regarding a consumer's right to a credit score. ECOA requires that the statement be very specific about the reasons for the adverse action. If a third party, such as a mortgage broker, requests a creditor to make a specific extension of credit, either directly or indirectly to an applicant, the required notification and reason statement can be made directly by the creditor or indirectly by the third party. Whichever is the case, the identity of the creditor must be disclosed to the applicant.